Hello again. Oh, you're muted.
Jackie's in a Slack saying she was grabbing a coffee.
Yep. I definitely can relate.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the document, and well, maybe we'll just wait a minute till Jackie turns up.
Sure.
Yeah, Hamilton view, that's a good one, actually. It seems to be the direction. You know, I actually have a general question about the, and I think I've asked that and I haven't had an answer from anyone about, we have an undocumented API that the front end uses, and then the front end uses a mix of this of the API, a public API, undocumented API, and then now GraphQL. And I'm just wondering if, you know, I'm just wondering why we don't document the internal API, and you know.
That's a great question.
And then once we start throwing GraphQL in the mix as well, it's like,
I know.
you know, there's a lot going on there.
I totally agree with that. And I don't have an answer, but actually I'm writing it down because I think
it's historical actually, but yeah, I started thinking about it again because there's an issue floating around at the moment about whether, I think it's probably getting a bit late, but whether 13.0 we should have version 5 of the API instead of current version 4. Of course, it would be possible, but I think it probably should have been flagged a bit earlier if we're going to, because it's a breaking change.
Yep.
Yeah. I see if I can find the issue. I think I put it in here actually. No, I didn't. I'll just grab it.
Cool. Yeah, on the converting HAML to Vue, not to get ahead, but it triggered a thought that when we had discussed Pages, so Pages does have UI, but it's all in Ruby. Is that
Pages,
accurate?
no, it's a bit different. So Pages is more like a web server. So Pages is, first of all, it's all written in Go. It's not written in Ruby.
Oh, it's Go.
Yeah, they do some Ruby work because they interact with Rails and sometimes there's stuff needed to be done. But the majority of the code is Go, and it's basically a custom web server. And so then it will serve something like a Jekyll or some type of.
All right, we're here for our front end, back end priority sync for release management. This is our first one. So Nicole, let's go ahead and kick off with you.
Thanks. So the first item I had here was prioritization when an issue requires GitLab UI contribution. So the issue I've linked here is an item that's in ready for dev, but the GitLab UI component is incomplete. So Jake had suggested a workaround there, but it looks like we don't even have designs for what that GitLab UI component should look like. So I think for the most part, the priority, in my opinion, would be if we have a feature that requires a new component, we weight that and knock that out first, because that would be the least amount of work. It wouldn't leave any tech debt on the dev side. For cases like this where an item has slipped through to ready for dev, I'm just curious both of your thoughts on.
So from the product standpoint, it's ready for development because the spec is there. We have like a problem solved, and then they could implement the solution that's available today, which is not the pajamas approved standard, right?
Right.
But it solves the problem of being able to sort the releases on that page. I completely agree that we can create an issue that's all about building the component and stage that one to be a release P1 and deliver that work first and then implement it for the releases page. I think that's a complete engineering decision. And the only part that needs to happen for me is just slapping the release P1 label on it and being aware that we won't be able to present the release pages sorting as a release post item until that issue has been delivered. So it's ready for development because it meets our criteria, which are has a weight, has a preliminary spec on it, enough to build something to, and there is discussion between backend and front end, which was like the three criteria for it to be moved into ready for development. But as far as breaking it down, that can be engineering completely in isolation, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I wasn't familiar with this issue, but just looking at it now, like it does look to be quite substantial. Like it's saying at least 5 MRs, and in fact, I can see it would probably be more, I think. But and so if it is so big, you know, do we want to wait for the design? Because then if it, you know, the design comes in, then it might require some rework.
Yeah. So since it's big, a 5, engineering can say, you know, we'd rather break this down into 2 issues, one about the component, and then the component for pajamas would need to go through the full life cycle. So that would put this issue still in ready for development because the spec is there, but we'd update the description to say it depends on, or it's blocked by this other issue for the component, and it can only be implemented after the component issue is shipped, reducing this sorts issue for the releases page to like 2 MRs, which is implementing this
component. Yeah.
But it's really like a breakdown discussion. This problem can be solved in 2 different ways, either using the pajamas process or building or really implementing the current GitLab UI solution as a workaround.
Right.
So from a product standpoint, I'm agnostic. I want the problem could be solved either way, but it's your decision as the engineering team to tell me that it's going to be more efficient for us to build this as a component. And then that new issue will go through planning, breakdown, and design, which will then block this issue essentially from being delivered.
So yeah, absolutely. And that makes total sense. That was my thoughts on it as well. If this one predates me, I just wanted to use it as an example, but had I seen that earlier, that would have been my suggestion, is to get a component issue created and in front of it, just from an efficiency standpoint. I guess my question here in terms of like, since that wasn't done for this particular issue, is there any priority around this issue that would cause us to say inefficiency is fine because this is super high priority? Or, you know what I'm saying? Or are we saying it makes more sense, it's more efficient to do component first, and it's fine to slip? So that's where I'm looking for your guidance there.
So typically, if the item is in the backlog still, it's not committed.
Got it.
So I'm only going to put things in a milestone if I feel pretty certain about the size and what we've already discussed about. But for this one, it has a backlog because it's a nice to have feature. It will be a beautification option, but it's not, if it's not in a milestone, then it's not a release P1 that I'm counting on us like being committed to move my direction forward from a product vision standpoint.
That makes sense. Sorry, my robo vacuum is kind of wonking out.
I should get myself one of those. So and I asked this question in another meeting recently. So pajamas is an in-progress project, and the idea is that eventually we will have all these components. I think I compared it to Bootstrap in the last. That we'll have all these components that can just kind of plug and play, but it's definitely work in progress, right? Like it's not really. Many of the parts that we see on GitLab now are custom for that page only, and they're not pajama components. Is that correct statement? Okay.
Yeah, and my understanding also is that pajamas is more of the design guidelines, like Google Material or what have you, and that the GitLab UI is the actual implementation of that guideline into a component. So so there's actually, you have to have the pajamas piece to implement the GitLab UI component. So there's a few steps there. And in this case, in this issue we were discussing, I don't even think there's a design for the component. So there's a lot of things to consider in terms of how long it would actually hold this issue up. So it's great to know, thank you, Jackie, for that context, that if it's not already tagged for release, that we have flexibility there to implement it the right way. So
yeah, and for some of these more UX driven conversations rather than like API driven conversations, I'm a little bit more accommodating to Hayana. So
yeah.
she gets to advise me on priority, which is interesting. And I know other product managers don't really gel that way, but I feel like she has the voice of the customer's experience in her mind. And she's the one that gets to tell me when these things are ready. So typically she'll raise her hand and move it into ready for development if she feels like something can be implemented without something. Without a full design. And in this one, it's still currently in her epic for review because we're kind of thinking through the exact same thing between having a pajamas design and then the GitLab UI component being implemented that way.
Great.
But I completely agree with your approach. And do you mind creating the issue, Nicole?
No, not at all. I'll do that.
Pinging me on it? Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Next issue.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Just a couple more, and these mine will be quick. So we talked about, or started to talk about, the opportunity for converting Haml to Vue. I guess I just want to raise this as wherever we have Haml views, because my understanding is the approach has been, if it's a new UI, we're just going to write it in Vue. If it's an old UI, that's where you know we're doing Haml right now, but there's an opportunity there. So if we have those, I was using Pages as an example. I don't know if that's accurate. So John, you'll have to correct me.
Yeah,
but where,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nicole.
No,
sorry.
I was just going to say, so wherever those Haml views lie, I think there's a good opportunity for us to say, let's convert those in a future release and get them prioritized.
Yeah, that was also my understanding, that we will progressively eventually get rid of all the Haml in the system. And so in terms of Pages, so Pages has some pages inside of GitLab that configure it, but it is the majority of the work in Pages doesn't really have a UI, and it's all just it's infrastructure backend and stuff.
Okay.
So do we have a Haml label already? So for example, I would say we would want like a technical debt label affixed to these issues, but maybe if we were to add a Haml rewrite label, or maybe like Haml to Vue label, so that we can filter our build board for these candidates, I can then make sure that we're prioritizing those mixes appropriately. So maybe we can stack rank some of these technical debt items that either have front end or technical debt with UX, like higher up.
I like that.
I'm open to creating a new label, but also leveraging the technical debt combination of tech debt plus front end. We just need to scrub the build board for those labels then.
Perfect.
So that actually leads into a great point. So we can just create labels, right? Like, and so if we do that though, like this is a good example. Like, we would want to coordinate with other develop engineering groups that we've created a new label, or do we create a label specifically for ourselves?
So we're in the GitLab project. You can create a label in the GitLab project or GitLab group for other people to use. So for example, Ori and I created the release P1, 2, and 3 labels, and then other teams wanted to start using those labels. So we ended up elevating, so they started using their own package P1, 2, and 3.
Oh, okay, right. Their own
verified.
version. Yeah. Okay.
So what they wanted though to do is to be able to like use that across all of the projects in the GitLab group. So they asked us to promote those labels to the group level instead of just the project level. So that's typically like what we could do is create the label and then reflect on it in our in the monthly retrospective issue, so that other teams can consume it. And I think that that's a good opportunity to give visibility to our process changes, but also be testing out and moving iteratively forward.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing that I kind of segued on, a little bit related with this, is well, it's a big segue, but you know, so we currently have an API, right? And then we have public API, and then we have this kind of undocumented API, and then we now use GraphQL for the front end stuff. And I've actually discussed this a couple of times with Nathan, and it seems to be there's not a lot of, you know, all the front end developers just know you just use these various. You can use any three of those, you know, any one of those three. And it just, you know, it's more of a high level decision, I think, but it makes me slightly nervous that we don't have a very well defined process on this stuff. You know, like if we have an internal API, I think that's fine, but I don't see why we wouldn't document it for ourselves, you know, for our engineers ourselves. It's a bit of a big segue from that HAML issue, but it's really, you know, because everything goes, all the view stuff goes through the API, right? Whereas the HAML goes directly against the controllers, but yeah. And possibly is where it came from, right? Because, you know, they probably just repurpose those same controllers to start serving the view stuff.
I agree with that, and I think it's something that I'll definitely look into. It's something that wasn't even on my radar, so thanks for raising that. And I think we should have some discussion around it.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's a super pressing issue, but I think it's an example of some technical debt that would be building up over time. Yeah.
Okay. I think that we should figure out what combination of labels we want to indicate these by. Like, for example, other technical debt issues, I know it's a technical debt related to an API because it's tech debt API. So we just need to figure out, like, if we want to affix a whole new HAML label here so that we can drive visibility, or if we want to leverage, again, technical and UI component. I feel like either of those might be appropriate as existing labels. So I'll let y'all think about that, and we can start implementing that in the build board. Great, perfect. And then I agree around documentation for both. I just Googled our issues, and it sounds like we implemented some documentation in 12.4, but the documentation is still pretty sparse. So I'm not sure if we should create an issue for our team as we begin to expand these capabilities. I know that Nathan currently has some items slotted for 13.1 around the GraphQL work. Yeah. And that might be something to ask him to help build out as he delivers those features. Great.
So yeah, so GraphQL, you know, it does have documentation, which is good, but I guess the question is, like, when does an engineer decide what one to use? Do I use a comment? Do I use, you know?
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, when he's building those out, he can help start the conversation as like a prescription for our team to follow, and then maybe we can open that up in the 13.1 iteration or retrospective.
Retrospective, yeah.
Cool.
All right, perfect.
Okay, and then real quick, last item, we just, actually, it came down kind of last minute for us, but just completed our Q2 OKRs. And I was just bringing it up here because I personally would like to see some product alignment with your product OKRs, Jackie, and make sure that we're mentioning things here that will link back into delivering on the items that your team is, or that the product team is responsible for. So it would be great, I think. Yes, and I'll add my link there.
Yeah, because it's really weird for me to be experiencing Sean and you having different OKRs from the engineering side.
I know, and I actually asked if that should be something we collaborate on instead of having two separate, and I was told two separate. So that's what I'm going with for now, but I think we can maybe improve on that moving forward. Yeah, I agree.
So Sean, drop your OKR issue here if you don't mind.
I mean, and I'm you know, it's my first OKR attempt, but also, you know, even if we don't directly collaborate, I think we should be at least visible what's on each other's OKRs, and
for sure,
you know, we can do some informal alignment perhaps. Yeah, because also I guess with OKRs, like, what happens at the end of the quarter? How strongly are they assessed? Because there does seem to be quite a lot of attention on them, actually. Maybe it's just because the end of the quarter, but
so,
you know, like,
from a product standpoint, we don't get like reprimanded or anything if we don't follow it, but we definitely get told that we
you
should
didn't
be
make them. Yeah.
right. And for transparency, some of the things that you and I talked about, Sean, in our one-on-one earlier about the North Star metrics, that's a big product push right now. And then the making CI/CD easy comment that I made to you, that's about, again, they have this thing called SPAN, which is about cross-stage users and namespaces. So that's the second part, is making sure that we increase stages per active namespace. So I'll link these issues here, but I think what you and I talk about could be the three that we like stack hands on internally. And, you know, for us aligned here to make sure that we move forward, because Hyana also has like 7 different OKRs as well. And if we have too many priorities, then we have no priorities. So we need to like,
of course.
we need to pick our top 2 and like buckle down on that. And for me, like, we should focus on features that will drive deployments out of GitLab. And then we should focus on developing our teammates. So making sure that we have scope that will stretch them and challenge them and have those conversations with them. And that should be our 2. I know that your managers are going to encourage you to be ambitious, but if we're focused on too many things, then we won't be delivering quality.
I completely agree with that. I think, because I've got quite a few, but then I'm wondering if I should cut it back a bit, particularly because it's my first OKR, to something that's, you know, that I can focus on and achieve. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks very much. I'm just looking at both of yours, and pretty interesting actually. Interesting reading. I guess we'll just go on to the next, whatever the next item is. Jackie.
Yeah. So this is going to take a lot longer than I expected. We'll probably have a separate meeting, or we'll dedicate our time in our next meeting. But what I wanted to do was walk through the build board with you all and start identifying the filters by which we want to start prioritizing things like technical debt, like bugs, because I feel pretty alone in this. And as a product manager, I don't like to ever feel alone. I want to have as many voices as possible that I have to reconcile and mesh to form what our priority is. So that's why, like, I spend so much time talking to customers, talking to stakeholders in the company, reaching out to Hyana and you all, so that I know that I'm making an informed decision when I put a release P1 on an issue. And right now, our mix is kind of off. We're delivering a lot of feature work. We're delivering some high priority bugs, but our backlog of bugs is still pretty high. And I would say high is probably a relative term, because I've definitely had products that were 10 years old that had 1,000 bugs that were ugly as sin, right? But these bugs are still accumulating. And as we're new in our offering, any of these hiccups that our customers hit will create friction, and will cause our customers not to want to use our solution. So I want to encourage our adoption curve. So I'll schedule a follow-up time, or we can make this weekly and get through the build board and kind of think through that. So
because I would love to do that, because I'm still learning about how the build board works. You know, like as an engineer, it's pretty simple, right? You just go get the next item, but there's obviously a lot more to it. But and then in the stack rank, how does that work? Or is that also another time?
So I can just talk through this really quickly. I've shared this Google Sheet with you all before, and what I just wanted to verbalize to everyone is our journey through maturity will be dependent on our ability to execute these jobs to be done. Sean, with the lack of your backfill, I'll need to adjust the delivery here in my direction pages. But I've added all of these jobs to be done to our handbook, so they're public. And again, I just want to iterate like the customer pains, what we're trying to solve in all of our categories, so that everybody is singing from the same sheet of music. I want all of our engineers to feel confident in what we're delivering toward and what problems we're trying to solve for our customers, so that when they're reaching into the backlog, they can confidently say, I'm working on something that will influence our customers, because that's going to deliver the most satisfaction for them as engineers. knowing that the value that they're driving.
Is the RM maturity path the next stage that we're trying to achieve?
Right.
Okay. Got it.
Or
Lovable.
it'll like
I
move.
love lovable.
Right. I do too. That's my favorite one. If we can get to lovable, that'd be awesome.
Who doesn't like lovable? Okay. So, all right. Okay. So I think with this meeting is currently, it's bi-weekly, right? Because it's alternating with the
Think big.
Think big. Yeah. So, which I think that's fine. Next item was, yeah, I just had a question. So I've been looking. I've got this Periscope. So I've heard the term Sensometer or something. Is that also the same thing as Periscope, or do we have some other dashboard?
Oh, SciSense was acquired Periscope. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same thing. Okay, right. So I have, John gave me this one. Is this the only dashboard we use, or are there other dashboards I should be looking at?
Let me share with you the Stage monthly active user dashboard, so that you're looking at like our usage pings implemented, and that's the stuff that like I'm refreshing, daily.
That's the one I want to see.
like creepy, like how's my consumption going?
like it's a stock price.
Right? So I'll share both of these. These are like the users and the usage metrics that I care about. But then from like a work in progress MRs, and Sean, I know I talked your ear off about this before, but I think that we need to get a good healthy baseline before we start like really hammering on our team to deliver 10 MRs. The fact that we've added a new teammate, the fact that they've changed managers several times on both the front end and the back end side, the fact that we split the team all in the same quarter, it's like, there's no way that our MRs are going to be stable. Like this is bullshit that we're like expecting it. So,
okay, good.
Yeah. So just wanted Nicole, you'd also to hear that. And if you had any other opinions, you can be like, no, Jackie, we should be.
And no, that's awesome. And that is why I wanted to bring up the OKRs, because I actually had an OKR for maintaining our MR rate versus increasing, just because of all of the above items that you mentioned. So it would be fantastic for Sean and I to be aligned there, right? It doesn't make sense for us to have two separate ones. So
yeah, I think maintaining is a good starting point. Absolutely. Also, like, is there a reason it's WIP group, or is it just? Well, I think I mentioned this earlier. So if we want some changes made on this, I mean, I can see how you can go and do it, but there's a group that should be doing it for us, right? We would open an issue for them.
I would check the data team and ask them if they could point you to their handbook page, because I tried Googling it before, and they can either point you to the Google page or like the documentation of this implementation issue, like who implemented this dashboard, which I think might give you a good like history on like, why is it still work in progress?
Yeah. I mean, I guess like I've had a look at what's behind them, and, for example, we could extend them, but I'm just wondering if there is a team in place that should be doing that, then I won't jump in and do it myself, but either way. Now, why have I got that there? Milestone picker.
You okay, Nicole?
I'm hearing the storm sirens going off, but it's absolutely sunny and beautiful outside. So maybe they're just testing
them. Okay. I was like,
that was just strange.
I don't know why I linked this issue. Sorry.
Okay.
It'll come to me. Yeah. Okay.
So then this last one, I just have this filter linked here. This is just front end, back end issues that are in progress. So pretty much I'm looking at the in dev and in review columns, and just wanted to check in, see if there's anything that you guys are hearing, or you all are hearing from the team, and if there's anything that we need to clean up. I think there might be extra consideration, Nicole, for the ready for development column, now that we have you on the team and you're like a little bit more up to speed, that if we can go through with like a fine-tooth comb that each of those issues have the right designs, if they have a front end label on them and all that jazz. I feel like we should evaluate our criteria and feel absolutely comfortable pinging me on it and be like, Jackie, I don't think this is ready. It needs to go back to scheduling, or it needs to go back to planning breakdown. And then we can move it.
Yep, that sounds great. And I've started to try and do that, but I definitely need to get further down the list. But yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I would just prioritize the ready for development with a release P on it, you know, like release priority of whatever. Because if it doesn't have a release priority on it, then it's like so far in the so far down there that
I mean, effectively, it needs to be a P1 or P2, right? At the current point in time for it to be
exactly. And I think for me, I've really only picked P1s and P2s into the ready for development column, but we have like P3s that are hanging out there that are more like beautification MRs. So if, for example, we get blocked on a front end piece, I wanted to have scope for someone like Nathan or Jake to pick up
something up
and be able to ship work without slowing down, right?
Yeah. You know the way that we share these links or these filters, like it's quite a long. There's no way in GitLab to basically save filters, right? Like save it into a list or something.
Yeah, you can create a board for it.
Okay, it'd be a nice feature, have a name.
Yes, it would, to have a sticky filter. Yes, like how there's jQuery queries in Jira and how you can like click that. My only thing that I love about Jira.
Mine too.
Because I used to watch cycle time and contributions and love that. We're getting there, I think.
We're getting there.
And then the only issue that I identified as the pajamas implementations is this milestone picker. But I think we can add this other issue that you linked here with the sorting component. And I think the things that I just wanted to highlight that like these are PJ's issues. Because they may have a longer documentation life cycle that we have to consider, because there's like this whole upstream process of like either like kind of like a backport MR, but not really getting the component back from the library. So just wanted to highlight those.
One last question about the pajamas stuff. So is that like its own little team who are building those components?
So the pajamas work is on the design team. So those are the foundations people. But then that's their team. They're GitLab Foundations. They're just a bunch of UX people. But each of the GitLab teams then commit to building whatever components they want to build.
Okay.
So that's why we're not seeing a lot of work against it, because teams, if it's owned by everybody, it's owned by nobody, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not a key deliverable, right? It's great. It's great for the wider community, but you've got a deliverable to do, and it takes longer to build a component. Yeah.
And we're not seeing a bunch of like support or push. Like we're one of the very few teams that are prioritizing like pajamas work, and that's because we're trying to help further reusability in GitLab, so that we can also benefit from these components down the road. But then there's the whole, like OKRs that Hyuna has, because she's going to become a maintainer for pajamas. So she wants to be able to like show that she's contributing back to the project.
And that was actually one of the reasons I wrote it down, is I love that it's being prioritized on release management, Jackie, because I'm not seeing that elsewhere. And then you just get this huge wave of technical debt, right? Of having to go back and re-implement those components once they're complete. So,
it'll just be healthier for our GitLab product. Like it's global and it's taking time from us, but it's going to be so nice a year from now when we need to add a milestone to a different layer. Like say that we expand this whole runbooks feature, and now we want to be able to associate a particular runbook to a milestone. We're going to be able to use that same damn thing. And so what if it took us 2 milestones to do? We won't have to redo that work for another month. Like, exactly.
No, exactly.
It'll still save us time.
I love that. Great.
All
Okay,
right. Well,
perfect.
thank you both very much. I think it's been a great, productive catch up.
Was this useful?
And,
Do we want to continue this?
Super useful for me. Yeah.
yeah, I think
Thank
so.
you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So yeah, so every other week we're doing it.
Yes. And if we find that we need it more frequently because we start picking up work, we can definitely do that.
Cool.
So while I've still got you both, so about the weekly release management, and the proposal to change the time zone. So I guess, I just want to be clear that I think that, most of us are in basically this kind of northern hemisphere time zone, and it was just kind of articulated that the southern hemisphere people felt a bit left out. And so maybe I'm thinking perhaps we might choose maybe the second. I would say just do 1 week, right? And maybe if we would do the second week, because well, I'm open to whichever one it would be, but I guess the first week is the start of the cycle, right? And the last week is the end of the cycle. So they're kind of significant weeks. Or what's your opinion on which one it should be? Or do we just kind of do it randomly?
I think we could rotate it every
Okay.
month.
Okay.
Because that way, like, it's equal. What I don't want to do is take away from the majority of our team being together. And that's the risk that we're running, is that 80% of our team is able to make the meeting now. And in the future, it's only going to be like 20% of the team for that 1 week. And I don't want that to erode our cadence and working together, because we are async primarily. We've moved a lot of our planning to be asynchronous, with the needs weight issue and the planning issue being our artifact there. That's our only opportunity to really talk about blockers and try to like remove those things.
So let's say that it's strictly on a trial basis, and we see how it goes, and if necessary we'll revert back to what we were doing before, or if if it doesn't have good attendance, I guess. Okay, great.
And I wonder if that was like old information before we implemented the bi-weekly sync with the Southern Hemisphere folks.
Well, this was last week, so.
Okay. But they still feel left out. Okay. Got
it. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit understandable, but there's also two of them, right? So, but it's important. I mean, they're my two guys, so.
Yeah, they're
to my
totally.
team at the moment. Yeah.
Agree. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank y'all. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
See you.